The boxing world united in grief as it mourned the passing of George Foreman, who died peacefully on March 21, 2025, remembered as a two-time heavyweight champion and Olympic gold medalist. Foreman was more than just a fighter. He was a cultural icon and a beloved figure far beyond the ropes across generations and weight classes. Professional boxers paid heartfelt tributes, honoring not just his legendary power in the ring, but also his wisdom, kindness, and resilience outside of it. From heavyweight titans to modern champions, each tribute reflected the deep respect Foreman commanded, and the lasting legacy he left behind among the many voices that honored George Foreman. After his passing, perhaps none resonated more deeply than that of fellow heavyweight legend Mike Tyson. Though from different eras, Tyson had long idolized Foreman, not only as a powerhouse inside the ring, but as a symbol of resilience, wisdom, and transformation. After Foreman's death on March 21, 2025, Tyson took to social media with a message that struck a powerful emotional chord: condolences to George Foreman's family. His contribution to boxing and beyond will never be forgotten. Those words weren't just a formality. They were laced with reverence. In addition to his tribute, Tyson shared two photos that captured the bond between the two champions. One was a candid from 2019, showing Tyson and Foreman posing with fists raised at a formal gala. Despite their age, their eyes held the fire of fighters and the warmth of friends. It was a gesture of mutual respect, a symbol of brotherhood that had grown over the years. The second image Tyson posted was a blast from the past, a photo from 1990, showing a young Tyson playfully pretending to throw an uppercut at Foreman during a press event. Both men are smiling, relaxed and full of life. That image, though light-hearted, carried deeper meaning. It showed a side of Foreman the public didn't always see: the man who could laugh, who could connect across generations, who could bring joy to even the fiercest competitors. Although Tyson and Foreman never met in the ring, a dream fight that fans often fantasized about, the respect between them was mutual and genuine. Tyson had openly spoken for years about Foreman's terrifying punching power. In interviews, he frequently listed Foreman as one of the hardest hitters in boxing history. George Foreman, that man hit like a mule. Tyson once said no one could match that kind of raw power. Tyson admired more than just Foreman's strength. He admired Foreman's journey. He often talked about how inspired he was by Foreman's comeback in his 40 and the grace with which he carried himself in retirement. Foreman had transformed from a fearsome champion to a smiling grill-selling preacher. And Tyson, who struggled publicly with his own identity after boxing, looked to Foreman as a blueprint for personal growth and redemption. Tyson's tribute following Foreman's death served as more than just a public farewell. It was a deeply personal acknowledgement of a man who had shaped his worldview in calling Foreman a figure whose contribution will never be forgotten. Tyson wasn't just talking about titles or knockouts. He was recognizing Foreman as a titan, whose presence loomed large over boxing for decades, whose life proved that greatness can come not only from victory, but from humility, faith, and change. For Tyson, Foreman was more than a fellow fighter. He was a mentor from afar, a symbol of what it means to fall and rise again. Their friendship, captured in photos and preserved in interviews, now stands as one of the most powerful testimonies Foreman's legacy, and, with Tyson's emotional send-off, one thing became clear: George Foreman wasn't just a legend of the past. He remains a guiding light for boxing's present and future. When George Foreman passed away, the tributes that came pouring in weren't just from his fellow heavyweights. They came from champions across every division, every continent, and every generation. One of the most touching came from Filipino icon Manny Pacquiao, an 8-division world champion who, despite competing nearly 100 pounds lighter than Foreman, had long admired the heavyweight legend's presence in and out of the ring. Pacquiao's message was brief, but it spoke volumes. On his official social media pages, he wrote simply, "Rest in paradise, Big George." The tone was reverent, affectionate, and sincere by calling him Big George. Pacquiao wasn't just acknowledging Foreman's physical size. He was recognizing the largeness of his legacy in the world of boxing. Big George had become more than a nickname. It was a symbol of might, wisdom, redemption, and power. That Pacquiao, one of the most beloved and accomplished fighters in boxing history, chose to honor Foreman with those words showed just how far-reaching Foreman's influence had become, though they came from different eras and competed in vastly different weight classes. Pacquiao and Foreman shared many similarities. Both began their careers with explosive power and youthful intensity. Both underwent spiritual transformations. Foreman became a preacher, while Pacquiao became a devout Christian, and later a senator in the Philippines. Both experienced massive popularity, not only in the boxing world, but among the general public, and both used their platforms to inspire others far beyond sports in the Philippines, where boxing is a national passion. Foreman's name carried deep respect, even among fans who never saw his prime. His second career, when he regained the heavyweight title at age 45, was legendary Pacquiao, who made his own comeback journeys. Time and time again had spoken admiringly in the past of Foreman's perseverance, and how he never let age or public doubt define his story. That admiration shone through in his tribute. Though Pacquiao didn't elaborate on social media, those close to the boxing world know. The two had crossed paths at multiple events over the years, at various international bouts, press conferences, and Hall of Fame gatherings. Pacquiao and Foreman had shared friendly conversations. Pacquiao, known for his humility, was often seen smiling in Foreman's company, while Foreman's larger-than-life personality seemed to warm instantly to the Filipino star. Their mutual respect transcended belts and records. It was built on character. What makes Pacquiao's tribute so meaningful is that it came from a fighter who didn't have to say much. His career accomplishments are nearly unmatched. Yet he paused to honor a man who, even from a different boxing universe, helped define what greatness truly means. Foreman was not only a heavyweight titan, he was a figure whose journey of reinvention, spirituality, and strength influenced warriors in every division. For Pacquiao, rest in paradise. It wasn't just a polite farewell, it was a final bow to a giant. And for fans across the world, it served as a reminder that the values George Foreman stood for, resilience, race, and redemption, are universal in the sport of boxing and still resonate with champions from every corner of the globe. In the modern era of boxing, where new stars emerge under bright lights and constant media attention, few figures have stood as consistently grounded and respectful as Anthony Joshua, a former unified heavyweight champion and Olympic gold medalist. Joshua has often expressed his reverence for the legends who paved the way before him, and when George Foreman passed away on March the 21st, 2025, Joshua's tribute, though brief, spoke volumes about how deeply Foreman's legacy was felt by today's champions on his Instagram story. Joshua shared the official statement released by the Foreman family, a heartfelt post mourning the death of their beloved patriarch alongside it. Joshua wrote just 2 words, R.I.P. Champ. It was simple, but it was powerful in those 3 letters, in R.I.P. followed by the word champ. Joshua summed up what George Foreman represented not only to him, but to generations of fighters around the world, by referring to Foreman as the champ. Joshua wasn't speaking about a title that came and went. He was acknowledging Foreman's permanent, untouchable status in the hierarchy of boxing greatness. This wasn't just any passing tribute. Joshua, like Foreman, is an Olympic gold medalist, having won the top prize at the 2012 London Game. That parallel between their amateur origins and rise to the heavyweight throne creates a symbolic link between the 2 champions. Foreman had won his Olympic gold 44 years earlier at the 1968 Mexico City Games, where he famously waved a small American flag after his victory for Joshua. The journey from Olympic success to professional stardom carried echoes of Foreman's path, making the loss of Big George feel like the end of an era that had influenced his own, although the 2 men never shared the ring or had an extended public friendship. Joshua had frequently mentioned his admiration for Foreman. In interviews he often referred to studying past champions, not just for their techniques, but for their mental fortitude and ability to evolve. And there was perhaps no better example of reinvention in boxing than George Foreman, who famously returned to the ring in his 40s, shocked the world by becoming the oldest heavyweight champion at 45, and did it all with grace, humility, and a smile. Joshua's decision to repost the Foreman family's official message added another layer of meaning to his tribute. The statement spoke of Foreman's life of faith, humility, and strength, values that Joshua himself has publicly embraced by sharing it. Joshua honored not only Foreman, the fighter, but Foreman, the man in a sport often known for its rivalries and bravado. Joshua's understated message felt especially poignant. It reminded fans that at the heart of boxing is a lineage, unbroken chain of warriors passing down their knowledge, spirit, and legacy. Joshua's R.I.P. champ wasn't just a farewell. It was a respectful nod from one champion to another across generations. For fans, the post served as a bridge between eras. It reminded the world that the giants of the past still inspire the champions of today. And for Joshua, it was a moment of reflection, an acknowledgement that while George Foreman may have left the earth, his influence continues to loom large over every fighter who dares to chase greatness among the many tributes paid to George Foreman. Following his passing, one stood out for its emotional weight and historical resonance. Nico Ali Walsh, a rising middleweight boxer and the grandson of Muhammad Ali, shared a heartfelt message that connected the past to the present in a way no one else could in honoring. Foreman Ali Walsh wasn't just remembering a boxing legend. He was acknowledging a man who had played a pivotal role in his family's story and by extension his own. Ali Walsh posted "Rest in peace" to one of the last remaining giants, sending much love and prayers to the Foreman family. May God grant him peace and paradise. It was a short statement, but it carried generations of meaning by referring to Foreman as one of the last remaining giants Nico captured. What many were feeling, the sense that an era had ended with Foreman's passing, the towering figure of boxing's golden age was gone. And for someone like Ali Walsh, who carries the torch of boxing royalty, the loss was deeply personal. The connection between George Foreman and Muhammad Ali is immortalized in history through their legendary 1974 bout the Rumble in the Jungle. It was one of the most iconic fights the sport has ever seen, and it forever bonded the two men in boxing lore. But what started as a brutal high takes battle eventually transformed into something greater, a deep and lasting friendship. Nico Ali Walsh grew up not only hearing stories of that fateful night in Zaire, but also witnessing the affection that bloomed between two former rivals by the time Ali was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease and appeared publicly with Foreman. Decades later, there was nothing but mutual respect and even love between them. Ali's family, including Nico, embraced that bond. Nico knew George Foreman not just as a name in a history book, but as someone who had been part of his grandfather's journey, growth and legacy. His tribute reflected that layered connection phrase, peace and paradise, carried added depth as it acknowledged Foreman's later life as a man of faith, an ordained minister who had turned from fierce warrior to gentle soul. Ali Walsh's words showed not just admiration for Foreman's achievements, but also a spiritual kinship that transcended wins and losses. What made Nico's tribute especially poignant was its symbolism. Here was the grandson of Muhammad Ali, paying respect to the man his grandfather once defeated, not with rivalry but with reverence. It was a gesture that spoke to the enduring themes of redemption, respect and brotherhood that defined Foreman's later years for Nico. Ali Walsh, George Foreman, represented more than just a heavyweight champion. He was a bridge to his grandfather's legacy, a mentor in humility, and a testament to the grace that can grow from conflict. In Mourning Foreman, Nico wasn't just honoring the past. He was carrying its values forward into the future of the sport in the wake of George Foreman's passing tributes poured in from fighters across the globe. But few were as heartfelt and deeply admiring as the words shared by Tony Bomber Bellew, former WBC cruiserweight champion from the United Kingdom, known for his own knockout power and passionate fighting style. Bellew paid homage to a man he clearly saw not just as a boxing icon, but as a moral giant whose influence transcended the ring on social media. Hello wrote "Rip" to one of the greatest human beings to ever put on boxing gloves. This man was truly amazing. There's no doubt, he's the greatest puncher boxing has ever seen. Rest easy, king. The world is a lesser place without you. From the very first line, Bellew's emotional connection to Foreman was clear, by calling him not only one of the greatest boxers, but one of the greatest human beings to ever lace up gloves below. Highlighted the way Foreman was regarded by fighters of later generations, not just for his physical dominance, but for the way he carried himself outside of competition. Foreman's humility, warmth, and wisdom left lasting impressions on boxers who never even shared an arrow with him, and Bellew's words captured that admiration with sincerity. Bellew didn't just praise Foreman as a fighter. He specifically acknowledged what many fans and experts have long debated: Foreman's unmatched punching power. There is no doubt. He's the greatest puncher boxing has ever seen, Bellew declared, coming from a former knockout artist himself. That statement carried weight. Bellew knew what it meant to deliver fight-ending shots, and for him to defer to Foreman as the hardest hitter in history showed just how revered Foreman's raw strength remains, even decades after his prime. What adds depth to Bellew's tribute is the generational gap. Bellew grew up watching the second act of George Foreman's career, the unlikely and all-inspiring comeback, where Foreman, in his mid-40s, returned to the ring after a decade away and shocked the world by regaining the heavyweight title. That version of Foreman smiling and unshakable was very different from the snarling young champion of the 1970s. But for Bellew and millions of others, that version was even more inspiring. It wasn't just about victories. It was about resilience, self-belief, and transformation. By ending his tribute with rest, Easy King, Bellew made it clear that Foreman was more than a legend. He was boxing royalty. That sentiment echoed across the boxing community, but it held special weight coming from a champion of a different weight class and era. It showed that Foreman's legacy wasn't limited to heavyweights or to Americans or even to his contemporaries. His story, his faith, his firepower, and his redemption resonated with anyone who ever dreamed of greatness. Bellew's words were not only a salute to a fellow fighter, but a deeply respectful farewell to a hero. In just a few sentences, he conveyed what so many felt: the sport of boxing lost one of its pillars, and the world is indeed a lesser place without George Foreman in it, even among the younger generation of fighters, many of whom weren't even born during George Foreman's second reign as heavyweight champion. The respect for Big George remains undeniable. One notable tribute came from Jake Paul, the social media influencer turned professional boxer who has helped bring new eyes to the sport through his unconventional rise. Paul may not come from a traditional boxing background, but his words following Foreman's passing demonstrated just how far-reaching Foreman's legacy truly is on his official account. On X, formerly Twitter, Paul wrote, "Rest in peace, George Foreman, and condolences to his entire family. He did great things inside and outside of the ring. Big George forever goated." While Paul's tribute was brief and framed in modern language, it was sincere and full of respect. His use of the term forever goated, internet slang for greatest of all time, was his way of giving Foreman the highest possible praise, affirming that his legendary status was permanent, unquestionable, and deeply respected by the new generation, referring to Foreman as Big George, added a note of familiarity and admiration, showing that even a fighter from a vastly different era and pathway saw him as a cultural icon. What makes Paul's tribute particularly interesting is how he highlighted Foreman's achievements, not only as a fighter, but also as a multifaceted public figure inside and outside of the ring. Paul wrote acknowledging that Foreman wasn't just a champion, known for his knockout power, but also a successful entrepreneur, a beloved television personality, and a man of faith who became an ordained minister later in life. That kind of well-rounded recognition from someone whose fan base spans far beyond traditional boxing audiences speaks volumes about Foreman's crossover appeal. Though Jake Paul didn't witness Foreman's fighting days firsthand, his words show how Foreman's story still resonates. The comeback at age 45 to reclaim the heavyweight crown, the reinvention from fearsome puncher to smiling pitchman, and the personal growth from angry young champion to wise, warm mentor. These elements of Foreman's journey continue to inspire. While Paul's tribute may not carry the same historical gravitas as those from legends like Tyson or Pacquiao, it is meaningful in another way. It demonstrates that George Foreman's name still echoes among rising fighters, even those from unconventional origins, in an era where social media and digital presence often define cultural relevance. Paul's tribute shows that Foreman's reach spans generations, formats, and audiences. For a figure like Jake Paul, who represents a new wave of fighters blending entertainment and sport, to take a moment to honor. Foreman underscores a simple truth: no matter how boxing evolves, legends remain untouchable. And George Foreman, forever goated, in Paul's words, will always be one of them.